So hello and welcome grade 11 parents and students, and today we're going to be talking about predicted grades. This is our Demystifying predicted grades presentation. So what we're going to cover today, in a second I'm going to be discussing why we issue predicted grades, when students might need them, and how they're viewed or used, or indeed probably not used or viewed by some universities in different countries. After this, Mr. Nestling will be discussing how we derive the predicted grades in the first place, the principles that we adhere to, the data we rely on, and the systems and the procedures we run through as a teaching faculty in the process. I know there have been many questions about predicted grades, so my goal today is to try and help you feel more comfortable with the process by the end of this session. To start, let's define exactly what predicted grades are. I've chosen a quote from UCAS, which you can see on the screen. The reason why I selected this quote is that UCAS is the Universities and Colleges Admission Services, is the centralised organisation for university applications in the UK. Predicted grades play a crucial role in this process because UK university admissions are largely based on students receiving predicted grades from their schools inside the UK. Therefore, they will then use predicted grades internationally as a result. These predicted grades then help the students make more well-informed decisions about where to apply. It's important to note that the significance and the use of predicted grades can vary on the education system of a particular country. So factors such as how the country's system is structured, the typical student, the students who are ordinarily studying in that country, and whether or not universities in that country consider those predicted grades. These are all things that influence the role of the use of predicted grades in the admissions process. Predicted grades are particularly relevant to home students, those who are predominantly educated within that country. So since universities within each system may use and interpret predicted grades differently. So that being said, UCAS is one of the primary users of predicted grades worldwide, though certainly not the only one. Their definition provides us a useful reference point here. So they say a predicted grade is a qualification grade that an applicant's school or college believes that they are likely to achieve under positive circumstances. Universities and colleges may use these grades as part of the admissions process to help them understand an applicant's potential. There are a few words and phrases in this definition that we've underlined and highlighted. These distinctions are important, and Mr. Nestling will later discuss some of the nuances and the semantics involved. This UCAS definition encapsulates what's expected of a predicted grade and helps clarify its role in the university process itself. There's another important context we need to recognise. We are an IB school. Around half of our graduating students each year, although not always exactly 50%, take the IB diploma programme. So the IB has its own definition of predicted grades, which differs slightly from the UCAS definition. According to the IB, a predicted grade is a teacher's assessment of the grade a candidate is expected to achieve. Is this the same as likely to achieve? Maybe, maybe not. That's something we'll discuss further. The prediction is based on all available evidence of the student's work, along with the teacher's understanding of the IB standards. It's crucial that these predictions are as accurate as possible, avoiding both under and over prediction. The IB actively monitors schools that consistently overestimate or underestimate student grades and takes measures to ensure accurate reporting. So, as an IB school, we have an obligation to uphold IB standards when we make predicted grades. I just wanted to establish this context because while predicted grades primarily exist for UK university admissions, the IB also has its own stance on it. You may have noticed that we haven't included quotes from the College Board regarding AP courses. That's because in the US context, predicted grades just simply don't exist. Unlike in the UK or in IB systems, the vast majority, around 95% of US high schools, do not provide predicted grades within the US. This concept is pretty much unfamiliar in American high schools because they generally are not required to make predictions unless a student is applying to universities outside the US system. Simply said, predicted grades aren't used by those US colleges in their decision-making process. We're going to go through that more later as well. So this highlights why understanding the educational context is so important. As I mentioned earlier, how predicted grades are used or not used depends on the curriculum that the student is following. Now that we've covered what the predicted grades are and how definitions can vary, I want to briefly touch on how they're used in some of the different countries where our students commonly apply to. Mr. Nestling will later go through more detail about the differences in these definitions. So once again, it's important to emphasize that context of the country's education system, both at the high school level and the transition into university when discussing predicted grades. Their significance varies widely, playing a major role in some systems, like in the UK, while being almost irrelevant in other systems, like in the US. I'll start focusing primarily on the UK, then move on to the US, and finally take a brief look at other countries where our students apply. UCAS operates with a credential-based admission system, meaning university admissions in the UK are primarily determined by the academic qualifications students earn in their final years of school. So for most UK students, this means A-levels, but other recognised qualifications include the IB diploma and BTEC, which are alternative accreditations awarded at the end of high school in a usual non-international UK school. Since final results are not available at the time of university applications, predicted grades play a really crucial role. Universities use these predicted grades to make conditional offers, meaning an applicant is accepted on the condition that they achieve the required final grade. Here we have quotes from two universities, one in London and one in Edinburgh, that emphasise the importance of predicted grades. So one states, we require predicted grades. We need them as evidence of potential future academic ability and success. Similarly, the University of Edinburgh states, these should be provided by your school and ideally included in your UCAS application. Of course, we're going to use it in your application, in your UCAS application if you apply to a UK university. For all our students applying to UK universities, predicted grades are essential. They serve a key factor in determining whether or not a student is likely to meet the minimum academic requirement or criteria required by these universities. At our school, we include predicted grades for externally examined courses, such as IB and AP courses. However, we do not generate predicted grades for internal high school courses, as this is neither expected nor required. So that means a grade 12 regular high school course won't have a predicted grade, but you will have achieved grades in grade 9, 10 and 11 in those regular high school courses if you are doing regular high school courses in grade 11. These predictions are included in UCAS applications and are carefully generated, a process that Mr. Nestling will discuss further how these are generated. It's also important to note that the UK system is designed to receive and use predicted grades, primarily from A-level students, but also from those following external programs like the IB and the AP. So they accept the predicted grades from AP and IB. A-level results are released in late August, whereas our students typically receive their results or their final results in July from their APs and their IBs. So this extra time allows them to confirm their grades with the university and meet the conditions of their university offers. It gives us a little bit more breathing room in the summer to make some final decisions and to move some things around if needed. I want to take a moment to highlight what a conditional offer from a university actually looks like. So here we have 3 real examples from our students' applications this year, showing the specific conditions universities have set for admission. London South Bank University, this offer requires a student to complete their US high school diploma with a specific GPA, with additional APs. University of Surrey, this offer includes required AP exam scores as part of the conditions. And the one from the University of Manchester, this example specifies the student must achieve 36 points in the IB diploma, with 6s in higher level subjects, including specific course requirements, such as an English A and at least a 5 in standard level maths. So these examples illustrate how universities communicate their academic expectations. A conditional offer means that while a student has received an offer of admission, they must meet certain minimum academic standards before it's finalised and become an unconditional offer, which will happen usually in the summer. Why do universities set these conditions? There are several reasons why universities establish different academic requirements. Number 1, supply and demand. Many universities receive far more applications than they have available places. Setting a minimum grade requirement helps them filter out applicants efficiently. Whether this is fair or not is a complete matter of perspective. Another one, number 2, course preparation. Right? Universities also use predicted grades to ensure students are academically prepared for their first year course, and they're at a certain standard academically to be able to engage in the course effectively. For example, if computer science program requires a 6 in higher level maths, the university can be confident that that student has the necessary mathematical foundation to be able to succeed in computer science. In short, conditional offers are universities' way of ensuring that admitted students meet necessary academic standards, both to manage admission numbers and to set students up for success in their chosen courses. While predicted grades are essential for almost all UK universities, the US system takes a completely different approach, one that reflects the broader differences between the 2 education systems. So let's compare the UK and US in terms of their education system quickly. When advising students, we often describe the UK education system as structured and fixed. In the UK, students typically will choose one subject and commit to studying it for 3 years with little room for flexibility. By contrast, the US system is exploratory and flexible. Students are not locked into a single field of study from the start. Instead, they can use a variety of courses, explore different subjects, and even switch majors partway through their degree. So, how this affects university admissions? Well, just as the academic structure differs, so does the admissions process. The UK relies on predicted grades, using them as a key factor in making conditional offers. The US, however, does not use predicted grades at all. Instead, admission decisions are based on a holistic review, considering factors such as high school transcripts showing actual grades from past coursework in different grade levels, grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11. Standardized test scores, SAT, ACT, AP, etc. Extracurricular activities, essays and supplemental essays, and letters of recommendation from teachers and from college counsellors. Because of this fundamental difference, predicted grades, so crucial in the UK, are almost entirely irrelevant in the US admissions. The process is not about forecasting a student's future academic performance, but rather assessing their overall profile and past achievements to determine if they're a good fit for the university. So as we've seen, predicted grades are rarely required in the US for colleges, but there are a few exceptions, which we'll cover a little bit later on. And this is because of that holistic admissions process. So what is the role of a high school transcript in the US admissions process? One of the biggest differences is that school transcript between the two countries, the two systems. In the UK, high school transcripts do not exist for students. Instead, we use those predicted grades in A-levels, IBs, BTECs, and even APs for international schools such as ourselves. In the US high school, every high school student has a transcript which provides multiple data points, typically covering 6 or 7 semesters by the time they apply. This transcript serves as a comprehensive record of the performance over the 4 years. Because US universities have detailed evidence of an applicant's academic history, they don't need to rely on what grades a student might get in that final year. So what does matter the most in an application? Well, each year the National Association for College Admission Counseling, or NACAC, surveys US university admission officers to determine the most important factors in their selection process. And the results, as you can see, there's a table generated on the right-hand side of these slides. The results will consistently show, year on year, high school grades in college preparation courses, honours courses, which are our regular high school courses at ACS. APs, IBs are the most important factor. So it's the grades achieved across that time, as well as an overall high school GPA. That also plays a crucial role. Also, standardized test scores, SAT, ACT, extracurricular activities. The essays carry varying degrees of weight depending on the institution as well. Some places, like large public universities or colleges in the US, in Florida, for example, may not require seeing a Common App essay, for example. However, a lot will look at that essay. Final exam scores for AP and or IB courses are actually rarely a significant factor when a decision is being made. In fact, from those surveyed, only 1% of the admissions officers considered these scores to be, quote, considerable importance. So, since these final scores of AP and IB scores aren't the major factor, predicted grades aren't expected either, except for a few specific cases. So how does our school handle predicted grades for the US? Well, we do not include predicted grades on high school transcripts. Predicted grades are not automatically sent to US universities. So what we do send automatically are the student's official high school transcript, a school profile as well, which outlines our course offerings, so the universities can see what rigorous choices of course selection students had on offer to them and what were chosen by the student, because that's an important factor. Has the student challenged themselves in their course selections? We'll also send college counsellor letters of recommendation and teacher recommendations where they are required as well. So when are predicted grades sent? We only send predicted grades if a university specifically requests them. While most US universities don't require them, there are some circumstances where they may be requested because a student may be an early decision applicant, for example. That's one reason. Early decision, or ED, is a binding admissions plan, meaning the students who apply under this option must commit to attend that university if they are accepted. It's a legal requirement. So ED applicants are typically due by November the 1st or slightly earlier in some schools or universities. Universities making ED decisions may sometimes request those predicted grades, especially for IB students, as additional evidence of a student's academic potential. This is particularly relevant when the university sees an upward trend in a student's grades from grade 9 through grade 11 and wants to confirm that that improvement and increase in trajectory of grades is continuing into grade 12. Now, when they're applying in November, the semester 1 in grade 12 on the transcript is not complete, which means that there is no data point for them to then see if that trajectory of grades is still increasing. So, for example, in recent admissions cycles, NYU and Tufts have contacted us to request predicted grades for specific IB students. Not all. They stated that seeing these grades would help them verify an upward trajectory already visible in the student's high school transcript. Another reason is that students might have a limited transcript history. Some students do not have a full 4-year high school transcript. For example, those who join ACS in grade 11 from an education system where fewer formal grades may have been recorded. This is not the case if they've come from a school with GCSEs in the UK system. Because these students may not have 6 or more academic data points that ACS students typically have, universities may request predicted grades as an additional academic evidence to assess the student's potential. Again, this is most common for IB students, as US universities are generally less familiar with the AP system using predicted grades as a whole. Some special cases may also be the reason for a request for predicted grades. Standardized testing and predicted grades. Recently, Dartmouth announced changes to its standardized testing policy. While they reinstated SAT and ACT requirements, they also allow students to submit IB predicted grades as an alternative if standardized test scores are unavailable. So if they haven't done their SAT, they can sometimes use the IB predicted grades in place there too. Other universities may similarly request predicted grades when assessing international students whose transcripts may not provide a clear picture of their academic ability. For ACS students studying the high school diploma without IB or AP courses, predicted grades are typically not required. However, in exceptional cases, for instance, when a student's recent academic performance shows significant improvement over earlier grades in previous grade levels, predicted grades can actually also help highlight this progress. So how are they submitted? How do we submit those predicted grades? Predicted grades are submitted as a complete report for all courses. Students cannot selectively send some of the courses with their predicted grades, but not other courses in their predicted grades. They must submit all of the rigorous courses that they're doing, IB courses that they're doing, in their entirety. If submitted, they're uploaded and sent to those universities by the college counsellor. We can also share them with the students if there's a portal and space for them to upload those predicted grades. However, communication with the college counsellor is essential in this. The decision to submit predicted grades is made on an individual basis through discussion with a college counsellor. This process ensures that predicted grades are not only used when they provide meaningful additional context, especially for students from educational systems with limited transcript history. Predicted grades in university admissions in Europe. Europe presents a more complex landscape. There are many different countries in Europe, all have slightly different rules and expectations based on their education systems. And this can vary within individual countries. So it's essential to recognise the diversity in how predicted grades are handled across the continent. One important thing to note is the private v public universities situation within Europe. Is the university private or is it a public university? Public universities tend to have more standardised admission processes, often with a greater focus on national exams or qualifications, while private universities might have more flexibility in their admissions criteria, potentially including the use of predicted grades. There's really much an individualised approach that we have to take when looking at European admissions. Okay? As with many other international contexts, the answer to questions regarding predicted grades in Europe is not a one-size-will-fit-all. It depends on the student, it depends on the curriculum, and it depends on the university that they're applying to. European universities often require an engaged approach from students. They should be proactive in asking questions, seeking guidance, and discussing their specific situation with the college counsellor. And personalised discussions are really crucial to navigate these varying requirements across different European institutions. Ultimately, each student's path may differ, so you need to engage early to understand your options and plan for your European university applications. Some countries using post-qualification admissions, while others, particularly private universities, requiring some predicted grades. Here's a general overview of how different European countries and universities approach this. So we've got Denmark, Sweden and Ireland are examples of post-qualification admissions. That means that they will expect a student to have achieved the qualification, the IB, the AP, the high school diploma, and actually have it in their hand when they're and submit the final grades at the end in order to make sure that there is that place available to them. So they follow the post-qualification admission system for their public universities. So in those countries, students wait until they receive their final high school grade, usually by mid to late July, before any admissions decisions are made. While students can pre-apply by setting up accounts and entering demographic details, admissions are based entirely on those final grades in the summer. These systems are not limited to local students, but also applies to international students, including those from schools with other qualifications. This means that admissions are typically not announced until final grades are confirmed, making it quite different from systems that rely on those predicted grades. Ireland has the CAO system in which you have to give your final score, get it converted into the Irish qualification, for example. Some private universities in Europe may use those predicted grades, as we've said. There is a little bit more flexibility here, and that can depend on whether the institution is publicly funded or private. Public universities, particularly like those in Denmark, Sweden and Ireland, have stricter admission policies, mostly focused on local students and their final grades. However, the private ones may be more open to looking at these predicted grades or other forms of evidence, such as historical academic achievement, like that in the high school diploma. Different qualifications, such as the IB diploma, the US high school diploma with APs, may impact how universities view these grades, these predicted grades. For example, IE in Madrid, generally, which is a private university, requires the predicted grades for the IB students as they're familiar with this system. However, they understand that US high school diploma students may not have predicted grades, as this is not a standard part of the US system. In this case, IE may base their admission decisions on the entire transcript and previous academic performance, instead of just those predicted grades. While predicted grades may still be submitted if a student has them, they are not required for all applicants with that high school diploma plus AP route. This is a good example of how private universities may have different and more flexible policies compared to those public ones. Another example is Bocconi University in Milan. Bocconi is known for its strong business programs and follows a unique policy. They don't require grade 12 information unless the student is applying after Christmas. Instead, Bocconi primarily uses grades 9, 10 and 11 as the basis for admissions decisions. This means that predicted grades are generally not used in their admissions process, even though a student's final grades may still be the basis for conditional offers. While this policy may seem unusual, it's a clear example of how private universities are able to tailor their criteria to the type of applicants that they expect. So some final thoughts. European university admissions can be complex, vary significantly between countries, and even between the type or style of university. It's important for students to engage in individual discussions with their college counsellor to understand how those predicted grades may apply to the specific situation and which universities will want them. Every university may have a slightly different approach handling predicted grades, and it's essential to navigate these differences with personalised guidance. So just examples for Europe, and the reason why students apply to Europe need to communicate and engage with the college counsellor is that we sometimes have to complete these individual forms. On the screen here, this is one of those forms, a specific form from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, a Dutch university, and this form is called a diploma statement. They want the student to complete courses on their form in their format and get the college counsellor to stamp it, to sign it. So the student then takes this signed and stamped by us, a copy, and uploads it into an online portal for their consideration. Sometimes they're happy for a student to upload their predicted grades. Other times they want it to come direct from the college counsellor or direct from the institution, the school. And so that regular and timely and organised communication is fundamental for students who are applying to Europe. Finally, let's look at a few other countries where policies on predicted grades can vary, especially between AP and IB students, due to their different educational contexts. Canada. Predicted grades are occasionally required for IB students, but not always. Sometimes we may need to fill out a form or send predicted grades upon request. Generally, Canadian universities base admission decisions on grades from 9th to 11th grade, and they may ask for an update in grade 12 progress through a document called Current Grades Document, which is typically provided before the winter holidays. If you're applying to a Canadian institution, you need to make sure that you're speaking to your college counsellor and let them know you're applying to a Canadian place, so then we can actually create a bespoke current grades document for you. Universities like McGill may request predicted grades, but this is university specific. Singapore is very similar to the UK. Predicted grades are often required. However, most students in Singapore apply after receiving their final grades, as their academic year begins in January, because it's in the Southern Hemisphere. Hong Kong. Their system is more like the UK's, with predicted grades commonly used for their admissions. And Korea and Japan. These countries typically follow a post-qualification admissions process, meaning that students must wait until they receive their final grades, usually in July, before submitting these grades for admissions. And in Australia, universities have both July and February start dates. For the July intake, predicted grades are sometimes accepted, and students can begin their applications around April-May if their predicted grades are strong. However, admission decisions are typically finalised only once final results are uploaded. In all these cases, it's crucial for students to have a conversation with their college counsellor to clarify the specific requirements for their chosen destination. As each country has its own system, individualised guidance ensures that students understand the expectations and timelines. Some key points on university applications with predicted grades being considered. Students can apply to universities with higher admission requirements, but with caution. Aim to be aspirational while maintaining realistic options. Limit aspirational choices to 1 or 2 universities. Avoid being left without university options in your final year. Predicted grade considerations. It's very important. Not all universities use predicted grades in the same way. Different policies exist for international v. home students. Some universities may offer lower admission requirements for full fee paying international students. University admission perspectives. Universities want students who can succeed academically. Predicted grades reflect potential for students to handle the course complexity. The goal is that student success is met, not just only university admission. So risks include potential transfer or dropout if academic preparedness is insufficient. Curriculum-specific variations needs to be thought about. Admission policies can vary by curriculum, IB, AP, high school diploma. Universities have internal equivalency tables. Different curricula may require slightly different application materials. Some practical advice. Consult college counsellors about applying strategically. Consider your academic trajectory and potential. Be prepared with multiple university options.
To listen to you. You're a mine of information, and I learned so much from our university and college counseling department. It's also fascinating to hear the latest trends in the university application system, because it's certainly a very dynamic environment, and it's very useful to find out what our students are going through this year. So this is often what we feel like when we're deriving predicted grades, as if we are looking in the crystal ball and trying to figure out what is going to happen in the future. And part of the idea of framing today's presentation as a demystification is to try and help the community understand the principles that we use and the processes that we use to derive predicted grades, which I'm sure are more robust, logical, and reliable than a crystal ball. So this is how we do it. We have two principles for prediction, and you've heard these words coming out of Mr. Wickham's mouth numerous times during this first half hour of the presentation, because they are principles that we live by when it comes to how we predict grades. We want our predicted grades to be realistic. So we would say that ACS Cobham students must have a reasonable chance at achieving the predicted grades we issue. We are doing the students a disservice if we are predicting them grades which we don't believe that they could get. On the flip side, we also want our predicted grades to be aspirational. So we would say that ACS Cobham students' predicted grades reflect what we believe the students are capable of achieving. So this is what you could say would be the benefit of the doubt. A student who's motivated, they get the right questions on the exam, everything goes well in grade 12 in their preparation for those final exams, and they do well, and they get what they were capable of achieving. This is the aspirational grade. The students are motivated, they're working hard, they're following their teacher's instructions, they're doing what we believe that they should do. We should predict them a grade that we believe they're capable of achieving. Now, when it comes to the language that UCAS use, they use the word likely. And interestingly enough, I did some research on the word likely, and it's quite contested as to what that actually means. Everybody has a different opinion. The most likely definition of likely is somewhere between 50 and 100% reliability in that this is going to happen. And then the IB says, well, we expect you to achieve this. It's very hard to put a percentage on it, but essentially it's where you would put your money. So the realistic grade is the one that we think a student is most likely to get. So that would be the 51% and up. However, if a student is, we believe, has a 45% chance of getting a grade, you might not call that realistic. You would, in that sense, say that it was an aspirational grade. And what UCAS would say is likely to achieve, but likely in positive circumstances. And they're used by a university to help understand the applicant's potential. So this is where I might feel comfortable predicting a student a grade where I say there's a 45% or 40% chance of them getting it. It's not where I would necessarily put my money, because I think it might be more likely that they will get a certain grade. However, if there is a reasonable chance that a motivated student is capable of achieving the grade, then we will give the benefit of the doubt, and we will give the aspirational grade. So this is showing how students should perform if they're as motivated and focused as they can be. And I put as they can be in bold here because we also need to understand the context of the student themselves, and we need to imagine what is the best possible circumstance that this individual student, who we know very well as our student, what are they capable of achieving? Excuse me 1 second. Thank you very much. So this is where we find ourselves as we are trying to walk the line through our principles. We're trying to find a happy medium between what is a realistic grade that we believe a student has likelihood of achieving and what is an aspirational grade that we believe a student has a likelihood of achieving in positive circumstances. So we are looking to give the student the benefit of the doubt, but also we want to believe that they can actually get it. How this works in practice, we did some data crunching, and I pulled this data from last year. So this is the class of 2023. And on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the grades that the students were predicted. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the grades that the students actually achieved. These are IB predictions and IB final results. As Mr. Wickham mentioned, excuse me, we are more used to seeing predictions with regards to IB grades. I think the story of these bar charts is that we are definitely giving students an opportunity to achieve the highest grades, and we're predicting them that opportunity. So you will see that the bar chart on the left, the bar to the furthest right is the 7, and we said that 25% of our students were going to get 7s. It ended up, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, that only 15% of the students got 7s. Now, it's only 15% compared to the 25. Actually, in terms of world averages, 15% is very high. For a school to have 15% of students achieving 7s is good. Typically, you would say that around 8% of students would achieve 7s as a world average. So we're definitely beating the world average here. So we're very comfortable with our results. But the story this is telling is that we are, when we're predicting grades, if a student is between a 6 and a 7, we're giving them the benefit of the doubt and we're saying, okay, aspirational grade, I'm going to give you a 7. We don't want to stand in the way of a student who is reaching for some pretty elite universities and is wanting to go to them with a very strong set of predicted grades. So we will give the benefit of the doubt. If a student is between a 6 and a 7, we'll predict them the 7. It will inevitably be, however, that a number of those students who we predict 7s will not get the 7. This is why we also need to be realistic. You'll also see from these charts that we predicted 34% of students will get 6s, and in the end, 30% got 6s. So less than the prediction, but pretty close. Where I think you see the flip side of the story is we're predicting a lot less students getting 3s, 4s, and 5s than actually students who achieve those grades. So the story is we will predict students higher, but we won't predict them too much higher that they don't end up with having any options to go to. So I hope that the story of the data is showing that we are living by our principles of being realistic and also aspirational. So how do we determine predicted grades? And there are kind of 3 areas of our determination here. The first and most important one is what I would refer to as the internal data. And this is the student's performance in that class. The student's performance in assessments within the class that they are being asked to predict is the primary data set that the teachers will look at. If it's an IB course, it will be easier for the teacher to predict because they will have had the whole of grade 11 to assess the student. If it's an AP course, we will be asked to predict right at the beginning because predictions are being requested from teachers in the October of the senior year. Therefore, in an AP course, they won't have had as much data based upon the student's performance to predict. So we also look at other factors, and you can understand for an AP student and a teacher trying to predict an AP grade, having only seen the student for a couple of months, you would want to also look at some other data. So we'll look at what we call external data too. So this is where teachers will consider the student's performance outside of that specific class, but in similar subjects. Also, we might consider standardized test scores, such as how the student does in CAT 4. So these CAT 4 tests, for example, will tell us what students should be predicted with regards to AP and IB courses in the future. So the standardized assessment test will give us some idea of what a student should perform, or what most students, I should say, who achieve such a result in the CAT 4 testing would later achieve in their IB or AP external assessments. And we also look at students' past performance at the school and then worldwide averages, because we cannot disregard certain trends with regards to the performance of ACS students in certain subjects, and also worldwide. There are certain subjects which a lot less students, for example, score the highest grades in, so we need to be wary of that when we are predicting. Obviously, the student's individual performance is the main data point that we're looking at, but in the absence of more data, or if we're on the fence, then we'll have to consider generally how students perform in certain subjects. And finally, it's perhaps not the most data-driven area, but it's certainly an area which informs a lot of our decision-making, is that we will look at the learning behaviors of the students themselves and the approaches to learning that the students take. So teachers use their professional judgment to determine predicted grades, especially when the data is inconclusive. Sometimes there's no clear trend or pattern in the data, and you notice that Mr. Wickham was talking about trends. It's something that universities like to consider for the various data points that we have. Is there a trend that the student is on? This is very, very helpful for teachers themselves when they're trying to determine predicted grades. However, if the student's grades are up and down, then the data is not necessarily giving you a clear trend or picture. In this sense, the student's individual work ethic and their approaches to learning are key factors when teachers are trying to put their hat on where do we think the student is going to end up. Okay, for grade 11 students and parents, because I know that this presentation is pitched predominantly at grade 11, I would like to draw your attention to something that we call the working at grade. And the working at grade is a grade that teachers will give to students at the end of the first year of the IB. So if your son or daughter is taking an IB diploma course, at the end of grade 11, in the final report, the teacher will also determine a working at grade. And the working at grade is where the teacher thinks that the student is currently performing in that course. So this is a very good point for students to have a look at and see, is the working at grade where I want my prediction to be? If not, then it's kind of a wake-up call for the student to think about, what do I need to do over the summer in order to ensure that my predicted grade is an improvement upon my working at grade? How we determine working at grades is a science. The IB would say that you should best fit the student into the grade where they are most showing competency against the final assessment criteria. The IB would also say, look at most recent, most consistent in order to try and determine the best fit grade. So I've got a scenario here from a student who in the first semester, at the beginning of the second semester, was scoring straight sixes. And then for the last 3 data points in grade 11, got 555. So you would, as a teacher, not necessarily know where do I put the working at grade. Perhaps you could argue that 6 is more frequent, but you could also argue that 5 is more recent. So what the teacher would do in this sense is that they would look at the overall grade descriptors for the course. So this is a science course. The teacher would then look, if you could see on the right-hand side of the screen, we have the overall grade descriptors for the science subjects. And what the teacher would do is they would read the grade descriptors for the 5 and for the grade 6, and they would see where does the student best fit. In this instance, the teacher decided that the student's working at grade was a 5. And this was at the beginning of the year, there was less material, the units were less complex. And then, so the student was able to score quite highly in this science course. But then as there was more material and also more challenging material, more HL content, the student struggled to keep up the very good results. And this is where the student is picking up 5s. So the teacher says, the student is currently working at a 5, if we look at the overall final grade descriptors of the course. That's not to say that the student could not, however, be predicted a 6. And for this student, that's exactly what happened. They were predicted a 6 for this course. So whilst the working at grade at the end of grade 11 was a 5, what happened over the summer is the student worked very hard reviewing the challenging material. And then at the beginning of grade 12, showed good progress in the first few assessments. Also, the student was working hard on their internal assessment over the summer. Student met the draft deadlines for the internal assessment, was discussing feedback with the teacher. The teacher felt happy to predict the student 6 in that instance. So the working at grade doesn't necessarily mean the predicted grade, but it's a good indicator. This is another scenario which is where the data is a little bit more up and down. We have a student scoring some 7s at the beginning of the year, and then pretty much consistently scoring 5s. I didn't look up the working at grade for this particular student. It might have been a 5. The prediction, however, at the end was a 6. This is where the teacher did feel that a 6 was both realistic and aspirational. So the student did manage to achieve some high grades at the beginning of the course when they were comfortable with the material. The student has shown that they can achieve the very highest levels when they're comfortable with the material. Therefore, the teacher felt comfortable predicting a 6 for this student. To mention AP predictions, I'd mentioned this before, but just because the past few slides have been mainly focused on the IB students when it comes to working at grades and how they inform predictions. Obviously, we don't have working at grades. We don't have that whole first year for AP. So we'll look at for AP students, standardized test results such as CAT4 I mentioned before. We will look at students' past performance in related subjects or related disciplines. That can really inform our decision making. If a student is doing well in sciences or mathematics, generally, if they tend to do well in social studies generally, for example, that might help us inform a psychology predicted grade. So we can look at similar subjects where there's similar skills being tested. Also, the first couple of months of the AP course itself are super important. We would want to see that the student is studying independently, they're doing everything that they need to do with AP Classroom and working independently on revising the material. This is all excellent data for the teacher at the beginning of the year to feel comfortable predicting a high grade in an AP subject. Also, there is a certain way of thinking in AP and a certain way of testing in AP. Therefore, if a student has previous high grades in AP subjects in grade 10 or grade 11, the teacher might feel more comfortable with predicting a high grade in the AP subject in grade 12. So we can look at past performance in AP subjects too, as well as how students generally do in that AP subject. So there's a whole lot of data which informs our decision making in AP. It's not just what happens in those first couple of months of the course. However, that is critical. I do want to give you a couple of takeaways at this point. For IB diploma students, grade 11 performance is critical. How students are performing, how they're scoring in grade 11 is very, very meaningful when it comes to how we determine their predicted grades. In AP courses, grade 11 performance in similar and/or AP subjects is also considered. So it's worth AP students in grade 11 being aware of that. And also, obviously, like Mr. Wicker mentioned, how they're actually performing in their AP courses this year is critical, because that's going to give them final awards that they can use in their university application process. But both IB and AP, the first few months of grade 12 is a determining factor in the predicted grades, and it's critical. And we also really want to stress students who are showing independence and motivation, students who are showing insight and self-awareness, students who are showing resilience, work ethic, determination. All of these intangible factors are huge in terms of teachers feeling comfortable to predict strong grades. So we do not want students to underestimate what it means to show up on time, hand your work in on time, and have a good working relationship with their teachers. Finally, I'd just like to run through how we predict, because I think it's interesting for parents and also students to know the process that we run through. So first of all, the subject teacher is going to review the student performance, and then they will determine a predicted grade. If the student had a different past teacher, both teachers will meet to discuss and determine the predicted grade. For example, some students might have a different teacher in the first and second year of the IB diploma. Then both teachers would work together in order to determine the predicted grade. Secondly, there's a departmental review. So the teacher will pass the predicted grade over to the head of department. The head of department will review the predicted grade for each teacher, considering teachers' past predictions, class averages, grades distribution, consistency among parallel classes. The head of department has a lot of things that they need to check through the predicted grades. And if the head of department has any questions, they'll go back to that teacher and review those questions together before determining a final departmental decision on the predicted grade for that student in that subject. Finally, after the head of department has signed off, the predicted grades come down to the high school academic office, where coordinator, principal, and assistant principal, the admin, will review all students' predicted grades, considering students' past performance in different subjects, consistency across different subjects, consistency across different departments. We've got various data sets and ways that we look at this data in order for us to be comfortable with the prediction. And then if, as an administration, we have any questions, we would definitely go to both the head of department and the teacher to discuss a particular predicted grade for a student. So there's a number of checks and balances that we go through before we issue the predicted grades to the students themselves. Just mindful of time, and I'd like to finish by looking forward to the timeline. So there aren't specific dates on here yet, although those will be shared with you in due course. Generally, this is what we look at. At the end of June, or when the report is published in June, you'll receive the working at grade for the grade 11 students in IB diploma courses. In September, we have early applicants applying to certain early courses like medicine, for example, in the UK, where predictions are going to be asked for us from the university and college counselling department earlier, because the applications are earlier. So the early applicants will receive predicted grades early, usually towards the end of September is when that process is happening. For most students, the teachers will be submitting their predicted grades for review in October. Then we run through the review process, which I've just been discussing on the past couple of slides. And then November is traditionally when students will receive the predicted grades. Maybe Mr. Wickham, you might have some more insights into if any of those deadlines are slightly different or whether they're pretty much the same for this year.
Pretty much going to be the same. The reason why November is the date is because we want students to have enough time to make well-informed final decisions and have submitted their applications to university. The majority of students submit their applications to universities our internal deadline is typically the 1st of December, but certainly by the Christmas holidays, so that they can have a Christmas, have a break, and also come back in January and manage the whole internal assessment, IB, an AP mock examination process, starting revision, completing their curricula, etc. So that's the timeline that we work to. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Wickham. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming. I believe that the Q&As have been mostly addressed on the chat. Perhaps I will...
I have a few that I can't answer, if that's okay.
Okay. Would you like to answer now?
No, that you might have the answer for.
Okay.
The first one, if a student has more than one teacher during the IB, but that teacher has left, what happens in terms of discussion and handover?
Yeah, so the teacher before leaving would have had a discussion and handover with the head of department with regards to predicted grades, and there would have been specific conversations and notes taken about certain students that would be managed in the handover from the leaving teacher would hand that information over to the head of department.
Wonderful. One more, and then we're nearly done, I promise. I've got a couple that I'd like to answer as well. But how does the IB organisation view our school if there is a discrepancy between predicted and achieved grades?
Yeah, so the IB organisation is very happy with ACS Cobham. We enter predicted grades for universities in October. But we also enter predicted grades just for the IB in April time. So these are grades which universities don't see, students don't see, but we are asked as a school to, now we're almost at the end of the course, where do you see your students in the individual courses? And so we will enter those predicted grades for the IB in April. There is a very high degree of consistency between where our teachers finally say that students will be on what students actually achieve. So the IB organization is super happy with us, and they believe that our teachers are very healthy with regards to their predictions.
But it's not just the IB that is tracking this data. You know, we have conversations with the universities. There are very clever, very data-driven admissions directors at universities. And I was recently having a conversation with somebody at a Canadian, highly selective Canadian university, and she could tell me the exact 10 schools in Turkey that consistently overpredict, and the students who, you know, when they receive predictions. So they do, some universities do use this information, do gather predicted and achieved grades from their applicants, typically only from students who actually enroll and go to that university, but they can track that data. That is something that is feasible to look at. And so it's not just the IB that we are being conscious of, but it's also how our school is being considered, and those predictions are being considered, you know, by other universities as well. And we want our students and our universities to have confidence that we are making reasonably accurate within the realms of, you know, what is, you know, reasonable in order to, in this process to be able to achieve. So that's something just to consider there. Just a couple of responses to that. Do parents, students see the April predicted grades from the IB? No, they do not. There is a question here about where can students see grade descriptors? I assume that's from in terms of IB grading. I think they're all on course guides. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They are published on each and every one of the IB course guides that the students have access to on Schoology.
Wonderful. Somebody asked a specific question for, I think, the University of Amsterdam, asked for 3 APs. What happens if a student only has 2 at the time of application? That's fine. They should be taking that 3rd in grade 12, and they will send a predicted grade. I just had a quick look on the UVA application. They want students to upload a letter from the school, which a student will get to their portal with that predicted grade on. So pretty straightforward there. There are a couple of, I think that's pretty much it. Oh, if predicted grades are not released until November, does that mean that someone applying to the UK cannot apply any earlier except for Cambridge and Oxford? Students can request their predicted grades earlier, but why would they? Giving themselves more time and demonstrating academic readiness and achieving, in that process is very, very rare. We would never advise a student unless they absolutely needed those predicted grades to request them earlier. It gives the teachers more time, gives them more data points to determine that accuracy. So it'd be very unusual and not something that I've come across, certainly in 6-7 years of doing this job. Not typically common.
Yeah, and also on that final point, if they're not required for the university, then I think it would be probably not a good idea for us to predict students at different times. We need to ensure that as a school we are being consistent and accurate in predicting students according to the same data sets and the same data points. Therefore, I would discourage a student from asking for a predicted grade early unless they had a need for it for a university application. All right, wonderful. So I believe we are probably at the end of our presentation.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate that you made it to the end. If there are any further questions regarding anything that we've talked about in this session, you can see both myself and Mr. Nestling's email addresses. You know how to get in touch with us. Do ask us anything that you are unsure about, and hopefully this has helped to clear up a lot of your questions as well. Thanks a lot, guys, and enjoy your evening.